In a world filled by demon gods and mysterious powers, our main character was suddenly transmigrated. By sheer accident, he created a world of his own, a place where he could shape anything and control everything. Those who entered saw him as a god and chose to follow him. They shared their secrets, never realizing that each one made him stronger. Before long, his power had grown beyond anything the world had ever known. The story begins with a young man waking up in pain, holding his head and feeling something is seriously wrong. When he opens his eyes, everything around him looks strange. The room, the desk, even the red moon outside the window are completely unfamiliar. He walks to the mirror and freezes. The face looking back isn't his. That's when he realizes he has somehow become another person named Klein Moretti. Trying to calm himself, he thinks back to what happened earlier that day. He had bought an old book from a street vendor filled with strange symbols and words. Out of curiosity, he tried reading them out loud as part of a luck ritual. He even placed food in the corners of his room, following the instructions. Nothing happened back then, but now he wonders if that strange ritual caused this. Suddenly, his head hurts again and strange memories begin to pour into his mind. But these memories aren't his, they belong to a man named Klein Moretti, a citizen of the Lone Kingdom on the northern continent. Klein's father was a soldier who died in service, and his pension helped Klein study. His mother, a follower of the Evernight goddess, passed away after he entered Koi University. Now Klein lives with his older brother and younger sister, relying on his brother's income. He studied history and learned ancient languages like Faisak and Herms, which are often used in old prayers and texts. As the new memories settled, the young man notices a notebook on the desk written in Herms. Inside, a message reads, "Everyone will die, including him." Fear runs through him. He looks down and sees his hands are dirty. When he looks in the mirror again, he sees a bullet hole in his forehead. He stands there, terrified, realizing he's somehow inside Klein Moretti's body, with no idea how or why it happened. Klein stood frozen in front of the mirror, staring at the bullet wound on his forehead. It looked real, but somehow he was still alive. The wound was already half healed, which made no sense. Maybe it was something caused by the transmigration. He then wondered how he had died before. His eyes fell on a revolver lying on the table. When he picked it up, he noticed one bullet was missing. A cold feeling ran through him as he realized that missing bullet was the one that killed him. There was also blood on another bullet, proving it was true. But was it suicide or murder? Suicide didn't seem possible. His family was too poor to even buy a gas lamp, so how could he have bought a revolver? And if it was murder, why would anyone kill someone like him? A poor history graduate with no power or enemies. Frustrated, he washed his face and tried to calm down. The memories of the body's original owner were messy and unclear. Still, he cleaned up the room and wiped away the blood, trying to make sense of what had happened. When Klein returned to the room, his eyes fell once again on the revolver. Before he could think further, a girl walked in and called his name. Startled, he quickly hid the gun and pretended to be busy winding a pocket watch. Trying to act calm, he greeted her and mentioned she was always on time. He explained he was just fixing her father's watch since the hands had stopped moving. Melissa frowned and snatched the watch from his hands, saying it belonged to their father, so she should be the one to repair it. As Klein watched her work, memories slowly came back to him. Melissa Moretti, 16 years old, the youngest in the family. A student at Tingen Technical School who dreamed of becoming a steam mechanic. Just like his memories said, she was naturally gifted with machines. After carefully adjusting the watch, Melissa handed it back and Klein thanked her, calling her the best. Before leaving, she gave him a worried look that made him wonder, did she think her brother had lost his mind? Later during breakfast, Melissa reminded him of his errands. She told him to buy fresh bread, meat, and peas, planning to cook lamb and pea stew for his upcoming interview. She emphasized only 8 pounds of bread since the rest would spoil in the heat and reminded him again not to forget the lamb and peas. Klein nodded quietly, knowing her words came from genuine care. She always looked after him, even repeating things just to make sure he remembered. But beneath his calm expression, Klein's mind was elsewhere. If he went out to buy the food, he could try another luck enhancement ritual. If it worked again, maybe he could return to his original world. Klein searched through his room until he found what he was looking for. With his task cleared, he stepped outside and made his way to the bazaar. The marketplace was alive with its daily rhythm. Shopkeepers shouted over one another, drawing customers in with promises of fresh cakes, bread, and vegetables brought directly from the city, all at cheap prices. Beggars sang in hopes of receiving coins, while children laughed and played in the streets. Klein observed the bustling scene and thought that no matter the world, marketplaces would always be filled with life. Lower-class people carried the same energy everywhere. He clutched the coins tightly, knowing this was all the money Benson had managed to save. The realization weighed heavily on him. Poverty remained the same regardless of worlds. Even after transmigrating, he was still dirt poor. He sighed, recalling how he had once believed transmigration always led to riches, but there was no time to dwell on it. He reminded himself that he needed to buy staple food quickly so he could return and attempt another luck enhancement ritual. His only hope was to transmigrate back to his original world. Klein entered a bakery and greeted the owner. He politely requested 8 pounds of rye bread. Mrs. Smyron welcomed him warmly and hurried to prepare his order. Curious, Klein asked if his brother Benson had returned yet. She explained that Benson would be gone for a few more days and praised him for being such a hardworking young man who surely deserved a good wife. She went on to speak fondly of Klein as well, noting that he had graduated in history from Koi University and would soon be making money. She insisted he should not continue living in such a poor apartment and encouraged him to at least find a place with his own bathroom. Klein responded kindly, remarking that she seemed especially lively that day. Yet within himself, unease grew. With the fragmented nature of the memories he had inherited, there was no way he could handle the upcoming job interview. More than that, his thoughts returned to his real home, his friends, and the wonderful life that awaited him there. He needed to transmigrate back. Mrs. Smyron interrupted his thoughts by telling him the total came to 9 pence. Clay noticed the price and commented that just a few days ago it had cost 11 and 2 months earlier it had been 15. She explained that prices had dropped thanks to the repeal of the Grain Act and told him to thank those who had marched in protest. Before he left, she reminded him again of Melissa's request for lamb and peas. On the street, a joker performed tricks to attract a crowd, loudly announcing that the circus would be putting on a show the following night. Klein noted the news with interest. Melissa would certainly enjoy something like that, and he wondered how much the tickets would cost. The joker even addressed him directly, inviting him to attend. Klein repeated the thought to himself, intrigued by the idea. As he moved further, a young fortune teller approached him, offering to tell his future. Klein declined at first, but the girl insisted that her tarot divination was highly accurate. The mention of tarot startled him. The word was pronounced exactly the same way as it had been on Earth. You began to wonder if tarot cards in this world were similar. A man on a nearby stage drew the attention of the crowd, explaining the origins of tarot in this world. He revealed that they had not come from any of the orthodox 7 gods, nor had they been passed down from ancient times. Instead, they had been invented only 170 years earlier by Rosal Gustav, then the consul of the Intis Republic. The speaker detailed Rosal's achievements. He had invented the steam engine, improved the sailboat, and overthrew the rule of the Intis kingdom. The Church of the God of Craftsmanship recognized him, and he became the first consul of the Republic. Later, he waged wars against many nations, turning Lemberg and other smaller countries into protectorates. Even powerful empires like Lone and Fenapotter were forced to bow before him. During his reign, Rosal transformed the Republic into the Intis Empire and named himself Emperor Caesar. It was under his leadership that the Church of the God of Craftsmanship received its first public divine revelation since the 5th epoch, leading it to be renamed the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. Rosal also introduced the paper-based system of cards, designing the very methods by which they could be played. Klein's thoughts grew tense as he recognized many of the names. Based on the fragments of memory within him, he suspected that this Emperor Caesar might have been another transmigrator, a senior like himself. Turning back to the fortune teller, he asked if the price for a reading was reasonable, and she smiled, offering it for free since he was her first customer of the day. She laid the cards down one by one: the Magician, the Emperor, Temperance, and the Hanged Man. Klein's breath quickened as he stared at the deck. The cards themselves were identical to those on Earth. The possibility that Rosal Gustav had truly been another transmigrator seemed more and more real. The girl asked him to shuffle the deck and cut it, assuring him there were no hidden fees. Reluctantly, Klein agreed. With the cards in hand, she looked at him and asked whether he wished to know his past, his present, or his future. Rosal instructed Klein to shuffle the cards again, explaining that only by shuffling after deciding on the question would the cards reveal answers that were truly relevant. Klein grew irritated, feeling she was being unnecessarily petty, as all he wanted was to confirm whether the reading was completely free. Despite his frustration, he reshuffled the deck once more. After finishing, he announced the task completed and questioned whether there were any issues this time. Rosal began laying out the cards. She revealed the first as representing the past, then the second as symbolizing the present, and finally the third as heralding the future. Klein chose to look at the present card first. Rosal turned it over, revealing the Fool. Klein's thoughts immediately recalled the meaning of the Fool tarot card, which was numbered 0. It represented a beginning branching into endless possibilities. He wondered what it might signify in his own case. Rosal remarked on the card's meaning before a sudden interruption occurred. A girl appeared, accusing Rosal of impersonating her again. As she forcefully dragged Rosal outside, she exposed Rosal as an animal trainer, explaining that fortune-telling was actually her own job. While leaving, Rosal reassured Klein not to worry about this development, stating that divination was simply something she liked and sometimes her interpretations could be surprisingly accurate. The real fortune-teller then turned to Klein, offering to help interpret his cards. He asked if the service was free, and upon learning it was not, declined the offer and left. As Klein walked away, he thought about the strange situation he had just been in, realizing he had nearly received a tarot reading from an animal trainer. Carrying the food Melissa had tasked him to buy, he reflected on his financial situation. Money was tight. He had spent 2 solely and 1 penny on the food, with the extra penny coming out of his own pocket. He thought about Benson, the breadwinner of the household, and felt sorry for him. At least he consoled himself. He had bought enough staple food to perform the luck enhancement ritual. Arriving home, Klein began translating the ritual's incantations. After much effort, he finally completed the translation. The Herm's language had proven extremely difficult, but he had managed to translate the incantation into ancient Faisak and the Lone language, deciding to try those versions first. With the staple food in place, he prepared to begin the ritual. He performed the invocation, calling for blessings from the immortal Lord of Heaven and Earth and from the Sky Lord of Heaven and Earth. Repeating the words again and again, he waited for an effect to manifest. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck his head, feeling like a nail being hammered into his skull. His head throbbed as if it would explode, his eyes barely able to open from the pain. Panic and regret filled his mind as the agony grew overwhelming, leaving him unsure of what was happening or who might be speaking in the background. In that moment of anguish, he wished he had simply left the ritual alone. Klein slowly awoke, his mind dazed as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. He wondered where he was, finding himself in a place unfamiliar and strange. Before him, a small red ball of light floated gently in the air. As he reached out to touch it, the glowing sphere darted away and disappeared from his grasp. His gaze shifted, and he saw a girl. Her name was Audrey. She stood before a mirror, staring intently at her reflection. With determination, she invoked the magic mirror, commanding it to awaken in the name of the Hall family. In her heart, disbelief rose as she realized her father had deceived her yet again. He had always claimed that the mirror once belonged to the Dark Emperor of the ancient Solomon Empire, insisting it was an extraordinary treasure. But this moment proved his stories were nothing more than lies. Shock spread across her face as she noticed something she had not expected. The scene shifted to the sea. A massive ship pushed forward through raging storms, tossed violently by the waves. Among the crew stood Wilson, a man who held in his hand a strange triangular object that gleamed with a mysterious light. He wondered about its nature, uncertain of the power it contained. Without warning, Audrey and Wilson found themselves drawn to Klein's location. Both of them stood near him, their expressions filled with confusion as they tried to understand how they had arrived in this strange place. Klein looked at them, stunned by the realization that there were others here with him. He noticed that they spoke the Lone language just as he did. Questions flooded his mind. What was this place? What was he trying to do? Even he did not know the answers. Yet a thought formed within him, that perhaps these 2 individuals had also been pulled into this mysterious world as a result of his luck enhancement ritual. The name Lahashovel echoed within his mind, followed by Wembovel, as he tried to piece together the meaning of these strange events. Instead of revealing himself too quickly, Klein decided to test the situation. By sounding things out, he might be able to gather valuable information. With that resolve, he concluded that this moment was nothing more than an attempt. Audrey and Wilson were startled when they heard the word attempt. Both of them wondered about the man who had said it. Audrey looked toward Klein and asked if his attempt was complete and if she could be allowed to return home. Smoke filled the air, making it difficult for Klein to see them clearly. From what little he could make out, you saw a girl with blonde hair and a man with blue hair. Yet their appearances remained vague, blurred as if hidden behind a veil. He wondered if this was because his power was too weak or because he did not yet understand the workings of this strange world. In this moment, he realized that they were the guests and he was the host. One truth he could state with certainty was that he held authority here. Klein told them that if they made a formal request, he could send them back immediately. Audrey listened and felt that his tone carried no malice. In her heart, she thought this was truly a wondrous experience. She admitted to herself that she liked mysteries and was fascinated by the supernatural. What she really wished to know was how one could become a Beyonder. Klein, however, questioned his own role. As host of this place, was it proper for him to simply stand there and answer questions? He thought of how it should be. There should be a temple and a long table, and he should be seated at the head, watching the guests as they posed their questions. Suddenly, the strange space around them shattered. In an instant, they were drawn into a vast palace. A grand table appeared before them, and Klein instinctively took the seat at its head. Audrey looked around in awe, calling it miraculous. Klein agreed. Wilson then spoke, asking if Klein was from Lone. He explained that anyone wishing to become a Beyonder should join the Church of the Evernight Goddess, the Church of the Lord of Storms, or the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. Yet he admitted that very few people were ever granted such an opportunity. Even within the churches themselves, Beyonders were rare, though they could still be found among courts, tribunals, and execution agencies, fighting against the growing dangers hidden in the dark. He noted that their numbers were far fewer now than in the early days of the Iron Age. Klein recalled from his inherited memories that the Iron Age was the name of the current epoch, the fifth epoch, which had begun more than 1300 years ago. Audrey quickly interjected, saying she already knew all of those things. In fact, she knew even more. She spoke of the Nighthawks, the mandated punishers, and the machinery hive mind. But despite her knowledge, she admitted that she did not want to lose her freedom. Wilson countered, asking if she had ever heard of anyone becoming a Beyonder without paying a price. He told her that if she refused to join a church and accept their tests, her only chance would be to approach one of the ancient noble families, whose histories stretch back over 1,000 years. Otherwise, she would have to risk seeking out one of the sinister organizations that lurked in the shadows. Audrey pouted and asked if there was truly no other way. Wilson looked at her, hesitated, and then turned his eyes toward Klain. Klain grew nervous under his gaze. Wilson then revealed that he possessed the recipes for 2 Sequence 9 potions. Audrey's eyes widened with excitement as she asked which 2. Klain silently repeated the words in his thoughts. Sequence 9. Wilson explained that true Beyonders relied on potions, and the names of those potions came from the blasphemy slate. Over time, the names had shifted as they passed through countless languages, each era altering them to fit its own manner of speech. What mattered most, he said, was that the names captured the core characteristics of the potions. He then described the first potion. It was called Sailor. The potion granted the ability to move steadily on the deck of a storm-tossed ship. It bestowed illusory scales that allowed its user to swim easily and remain underwater for 10 minutes, like a creature of the sea. Audrey thought it sounded incredible and linked it to the Keeper of the Sea, a title connected with the Lord of Storms. Wilson confirmed that in ancient times it had indeed been known as Keeper of the Sea. The second recipe, he said, was for a potion called Spectator. He admitted he did not know its ancient name, but its abilities were clear. It greatly heightened mental energy and observation. By carefully watching people's expressions, behaviors, and words, a spectator could glimpse their inner thoughts. It was like watching a play unfold, whether at a grand banquet or on a crowded street. But there was one condition. A spectator would always remain only that, a spectator. Audrey considered this carefully and admitted that she liked the idea of spectator. She asked how she could obtain the recipe and what she might offer in trade. Wilson replied that what he wanted was ghost shark blood, at least 100 milliliters. She pressed further, asking how she could give it to him and how she could be certain that he would give her the real formula once he had received it. Wilson answered that he would provide an address. After receiving the ghost shark blood, he would send her the recipe. Alternatively, he could tell her directly here, in this place. As for its authenticity, Audrey suggested that with this mysterious lord as witness, both of them could be assured. Finally, Audrey turned to Klain and asked respectfully what they should call him. Klain gave his answer. They could call him the Fool. Audrey Wilson was left in shock when Klain stated that they could simply call him Fool. Both Audrey and Wilson immediately bowed to him with respect, honoring his presence. Klain then gave them permission to continue. Wilson explained that the way he was responding to them fit his current status. He instructed that if they were able to obtain the ghost shark blood, it should be sent to the Warrior and Sea Bar on Pelican Street, located in the White Rose district of Pritz Harbor. He further added that they must tell the bar's owner, Williams, that it was what the captain wanted. Once he confirmed that everything was in order, he would either send the potion formula to them or provide the recipe directly. Audrey chose the more secure method and asked for the recipe directly. She admitted that although it would truly test her memory, she wanted Klain to make a few more attempts like this one. In her thoughts, she considered that since Klain had already agreed to be a witness for the transaction, it implied that they would be having more gatherings like this in the future. Wilson turned his attention back to Klain, remarking that the gathering was quite interesting. He acknowledged that despite Klain's remarkable power, there were surely certain fields where he was not an expert. Both he and the highborn young lady sitting across from him had their own experiences, insights, connections, and resources. Perhaps in the future, they would be able to help Klain carry out tasks that would be inconvenient for him to handle personally. Audrey became conscious of his words, realizing he had called her a highborn young lady, and wondered if her accent and mannerisms made it that obvious. Yet she quickly shifted her focus, pointing out that if their gatherings became a regular occurrence, Klain could definitely delegate some of his tasks to the two of them, so long as they were within their ability to accomplish. Klain reflected silently to himself. He thought about how having more gatherings would allow him to gain more knowledge about the secrets of the Beyonders as well as many other mysteries. Such meetings might even help him find a way to transmigrate back. During these gatherings, he could receive recipes for potions and also learn other things that could prove useful in his current situation. However, he also recognized that the more gatherings they held, the greater the risk that his true identity would eventually be exposed. Both Wilson and Audrey grew nervous. Audrey asked if Klain agreed and immediately suggested they should also give themselves code names. Since Klain was known as the Fool, taken from a tarot card, it would be best if their names followed a similar theme, especially since these meetings would be regular, long-term, and secret. She declared that she would take her name from a tarot card as well, deciding on justice. She then turned to Wilson, who chose to name himself the Hanged Man. Excited, Audrey suggested that since all of their code names were taken from major arcana tarot cards, they should call their gathering the Tarot Club. She happily declared that they would be the founding members of this club and asked for Klein's approval. Klein, however, dismissed the matter as trivial and told them they could decide for themselves. Audrey then recalled something she had once heard. She stated that tarot cards were invented by Emperor Roselle for games, and that they did not actually possess any divinatory powers. Wilson corrected this, saying that divination often came from within oneself. He explained that everyone possessed spirituality and that all people were able to come into contact with the spiritual world to sense hidden information about themselves. The only problem was that ordinary people were not aware of this and were unable to interpret the signs they received. He continued, explaining that divination tools could help present some of that information, with dream interpretation being the simplest example. Audrey agreed, pointing out that tarot cards fell into this category of tools. They used symbolism and easily digestible ideas to help interpret signs in a more convenient and accurate way. Klein, however, felt his head beginning to ache once again. Audrey quickly clarified that she was not questioning the validity of tarot cards, but that she had once heard that Emperor Roselle actually created another set of cards as well. These cards symbolized an unknown power. There were 22 in total, and he had used them as a reference when creating the 22 major arcana tarot cards that were used in games. Klein's headache grew worse as he realized he would not be able to maintain his connection with the world much longer. Wilson then explained further, saying that it was correct. It was said that Emperor Roselle once saw the blasphemy slate, and that the profound mysteries of the 22 paths of the divine were hidden within that deck of cards. Audrey repeated the phrase softly to herself, acknowledging the 22 paths of the divine. At that point, Klein announced that the gathering would end. He stood up, concluding the meeting and stating that they should look forward to their next gathering. Klein returned to himself and found that he was back inside his home. He thought to himself that it had all felt like a dream. The memory of that gray and foggy world lingered in his mind, and he wondered what exactly it was. He questioned who or what kind of power had created the changes that happened earlier. He observed that time seemed to progress at the same pace in the fog-filled world as it did in reality. The gathering he had just experienced fascinated him deeply. Even though they clearly lived in different parts of the world, they had been able to communicate across such vast distances. As he reflected on it further, the idea began to feel strangely familiar. Yet the truth remained, he would not be able to return to Earth, at least not in the short term. From this moment on, there was no longer a Zhou. There was only Klein. Meanwhile, Wilson returned to his ship. In his hand, a triangular object cracked and broke apart. He then approached the captain of the vessel, who defiantly declared that he would not give in. Wilson replied with cold confidence, insisting that he had faith in the outcome. Without hesitation, Wilson seized the captain by the neck and hurled him overboard into the sea. One of the mercenaries quickly asked what had happened. Wilson dismissed the concern, claiming that the captain had simply escaped. Yet he muttered to himself that the man still possessed some of his beyonder powers. He brushed it aside, stating that the captain was only of secondary importance. Wilson reminded the others that they would still be rewarded for discovering the ghost ship from the Tudor era. He ordered them to focus on repairs. As the storm continued to rage around them, he remarked that the captain would not be able to last long in the open sea. In his mind, Wilson declared that a new era had begun. After Wilson's return to the sea, the focus shifted to Audrey. She too returned home, and in her hand, the same triangular object shattered into pieces. Her heart raced as she realized it had not been a dream. She was certain of it. A sudden knock echoed on her door. Startled, she asked who was there. A servant's voice replied respectfully, asking permission to enter. Audrey allowed it, and the servant stepped in, informing her that it was time to begin preparing. The servant then noticed the broken fragments nearby and muttered in dismay that something had been broken. Audrey quickly covered it up, claiming that Susie, her pet, had been in the room earlier and had caused the mess. The servant sighed and reminded her to train the dog properly, commenting on how destructive dogs could be. Audrey agreed hurriedly, brushing it aside. Their usual routine began. The servant asked which dress Audrey wished to wear. She admitted her fondness for the one Mrs. Guinea had designed for her 17th birthday. The servant immediately objected, pointing out that it had already been worn at a formal occasion. Wearing it again at such an event would lead people to suspect that the Hall family was going through financial struggles. Audrey protested, but the servant remained firm. She could wear it at home, but not to a grand gathering. Reluctantly, Audrey decided on another dress, the one Mr. Sades had sent just the day before yesterday, with lotus designs beautifully embroidered on the sleeves. The servant praised her choice, admiring her refined taste. With care and precision, they helped Audrey into the elegant dress, completing her transformation into a vision of grace. Soon after, her father arrived, teasing her warmly by calling her the brightest jewel in Backland and reminding her that it was time to head out. Audrey frowned at the title and asked him not to call her that. With a smile, he rephrased it, calling her his beautiful little princess. She replied firmly that she wanted to walk on his right side. His left, she reminded him, belonged to Mrs. Hall, the countess, and she could never take her dear mother's place. Amused and touched, her father agreed, declaring that his right side would then belong to his greatest pride. Together, they set out, their carriage carrying them to Pritz Harbor at the Oak Island Royal Navy Base. The atmosphere there was filled with excitement. Many people had gathered, their eyes fixed on the sea, waiting eagerly for the arrival of the Lord of Storms, who was said to be coming aboard a ship. As the vessel appeared on the horizon, Audrey looked upon it in awe, realizing it was an ironclad warship. The people gathered together at the harbor, their attention fixed on the sky as an airship slowly descended. Audrey gazed up in awe, recognizing it instantly in her thoughts as the king's airship. The vessel landed, and from its gates emerged rows of guards and soldiers marching in disciplined formation. Among the nobles who stepped down, one figure stood out as the ruler of the Len Kingdom, King George himself. Audrey's heart skipped at the sight. She marveled that even in this modern age of iron, steam, and guns, there were still those who persisted in wearing full suits of metal armor. She wondered if they could be higher-order disciplinary paladins. Attention soon shifted to another important figure, the Prime Minister of the Len Kingdom, Mizid Nagan. With commanding presence, he drew the focus of the crowd and began to speak. He declared that before them stood a history-making ironclad warship. His words carried pride as he described its immense power. The ship measured 101 meters long and 21 meters wide, built with a high freeboard design. Its main armor belt was 457 millimeters thick, and its total displacement reached 10,060 tons. Armed with a main battery of 4 305mm guns, it was complemented by 6 rapid-firing guns, 12 6-pounder guns, 18 6-barrel machine guns, and 4 torpedo tubes. It could reach speeds of 16 knots. The Prime Minister declared it a true hegemon, a conqueror of the seas. After his declaration, he approached the king with respect, requesting His Majesty to bestow a name upon the warship. King George agreed, stating that since its journey began in Pritz Harbor, it would be named the Pritz. At the moment of naming, fireworks were set off in celebration. The Prime Minister continued, proclaiming that from this day forward, the 7 pirates who called themselves admirals and the 4 pirates who called themselves kings would tremble in fear. Their era was ending. Even if they possessed extraordinary powers, ghost ships, or cursed vessels, none could rival the might of the ironclad warship. Only ships of this kind rule the seas. Yet from within the crowd, doubts arose. One man questioned whether pirates could simply build ironclads of their own. Another echoed the concern, wondering what would happen if they managed to obtain such ships. A third voice asked what could be done if pirates armed themselves with ironclads as well. The Prime Minister answered with firm conviction. He declared it impossible. The construction of such a vessel required 3 large coal and steel amalgamators, 20 massive steel factories, 50 scientists, senior engineers, 2 royal shipyards, and nearly 100 separate parts factories. It demanded the efforts of the Admiralty, a shipbuilding committee, the cabinet, and above all, a determined king with foresight, supported by a powerful nation with an annual steel output of 12 million tons. Pirates, he said, would never achieve such a feat. Once again, he raised his voice to the people, announcing that the era of guns and giant warships had arrived. The scene shifted away from the grand display and returned to Klein. He sat quietly, reading a book, his mind absorbed in its pages. Closing it, he looked at his hand, noticing the faint disappearance of markings. He saw 4 dots arranged in a square and wondered if they corresponded to the 4 pieces of staple food placed in the 4 corners of his room. He questioned if, in the future, this meant he would no longer need to prepare staple food and could instead proceed directly with ritual and incantations. The thought seemed convenient, yet unease gnawed at him. On the surface, it appeared beneficial, but he felt frightened by his lack of understanding. He lay back on his bed, reflecting further. From Taoist rituals to all that had happened since, he realized that fear remained humanity's oldest and strongest emotion, with fear of the unknown being the most powerful of all. After some time, he drifted into sleep, only to awaken later with a dull ache in his head. He muttered to himself that it had been a pleasant nap despite the pain. Glancing at his watch, he noted the time. It was 12:30, and he had slept for 3 hours. He realized that time here was measured in the same way as on Earth, though he could not be certain if an hour here matched an hour there exactly. His stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He noticed a piece of bread lying to the side of the room and picked it up. Staring at it, he wondered if this was the life he was bound to live, eating rye bread for breakfast, rye bread for lunch, and only during dinner having the chance to taste meat. Suddenly, an idea came to him. His eyes brightened with determination, and as he looked toward the kitchen, he thought of the strength he carried as a transmigrator. It was time to demonstrate it. Klein sat with the potato in his hand, peeling it slowly. He fried the pieces, toasted some bread, and prepared his breakfast. Once it was ready, he ate the potatoes quickly, telling himself he would eat them to stave off his hunger for now, saving the lamb to share with Melissa when she returned. The taste filled his mouth, familiar and comforting. It reminded him of his childhood, when he had loved eating potatoes this way. Finishing his meal, he felt life return to his body, realizing just how much energy the ritual had drained from him. Now, with his stomach full, it was time to get to work. He turned his attention to the real Klein's journal, flipping through the pages carefully. It was undeniable that he had transmigrated into this body, and there was no way to escape it. The only path forward was to find a way into mysticism and become a Beyonder, just like the people known as Justice and the Hanged Man had discussed. Fortunately, Klein had been a meticulous man who kept a journal. This habit might hold answers. Before the next gathering, he needed to read through it and piece together the gaps in Klein's fragmented memories. But there was another mystery: why Klein had committed suicide and what had truly happened to him. His eyes fell on an entry dated May 29th. In it, the original Klein wrote that Welch had found him and mentioned obtaining a notebook from the Fourth Epoch. Instead of seeking help from the archaeology department, Welch had chosen to approach Klein and Naya. Klein had agreed to help, though he wrote that he would have to wait until after graduation and his thesis defense to focus on it. The words sent a shiver down the transmigrator's spine. According to Klein's memories, this was currently the Iron Age, and the Fourth Epoch had come just before it. Yet even historians only pieced together fragments of that time from theological texts of the 7 major churches. At present, they only knew of the Solomon Empire, the Tudor dynasty, and the Trunsost Empire. Klein thought of the excitement the original must have felt as a history student when discovering something that could reveal more about the Fourth Epoch, also called the Age of the Gods. But then another thought crept in. Could the information Welch had found have something to do with Klein's death? Were there more clues hidden in these pages? He flipped further, reaching an entry dated July 24th. Naya had told Klein that they had discovered something new, and Klein had decided to go and see it. Another entry dated June 25th recorded that from newly interpreted content, they had learned the notebook's original owner had accepted a mission to climb the highest peak of the Hornisus mountain range, where the nation of the Evernight had been located. The thought stunned him. The highest peak of the Hornisus mountains was over 6,000 meters tall. How can a nation possibly exist up there? And how would they survive? But the journal ended there. He stared at the last words, realizing he had transmigrated into Klein's body on the night of June 28th. It struck him suddenly. Was that cryptic line the key? Everyone will die, including me. It seemed to be the final clue left behind. He reflected on this world and its differences. Universities were rare, and mostly nobles and aristocrats could attend. Even so, any commoner who managed to enter would still leave with valuable connections, even if they failed. Klein had been one of those students, and Welch, son of a wealthy banker, had often come to him and Naya for help due to their group assignments. The thought sparked a new plan. He needed to visit Welch and take another look at the ancient notebook. Perhaps he would be able to uncover more clues. Yet he also knew how such situations unfolded in stories and movies. If the notebook truly had something to do with him, he would most likely run into danger by going. But he could not avoid it either. Running would only keep him from ever solving the mystery. And he certainly could not go to the police. How could he report his own suicide? Just as his mind raced with these thoughts, a knock came at the door. Klein held a gun in his hand and wondered who could possibly be arriving at such a time. From the other side of the door, a voice identified itself as Bitch Mountbatten. Klein immediately realized that it was the police. He placed the gun aside, telling himself that should be enough, and moved toward the door. Opening it with a yawn, he pretended to have just awoken, apologizing as if he had been taking a nap. But the moment his eyes fell on Batten, his expression stiffened. Standing beside him were 3 other police officers. Batten explained that the officers had something to ask him. Klein invited them in, asking what the matter was. His attention, however, drifted to the epaulette of one of the men, noticing the 6-pointed stars embroidered there. That detail made it clear these 3 were inspectors. One of them began the questioning by asking if Klein knew Welch McGovern. Klein, startled, asked if something had happened to him, but the inspector cut him off, saying the questioning was routine and there was no need to be nervous. Klein confirmed that if they were referring to Welch McGovern, the graduate from Coy University in Constant, then yes, he knew him. They had been classmates under Senior Associate Professor Quentin Cohen. Klein admitted that their relationship was good. He explained that he, Welch, and Naya had been meeting often, interpreting and discussing a document Welch had obtained, one related to the Fourth Epoch. That document was in the form of a notebook. With hesitation, Klein asked if something had happened to his friends. The inspector informed him with regret that Welch had passed away. Shock struck Klein, and his voice trembled as he asked about Naya. The inspector revealed that she too had died, both of them found in Welch's residence. Klein's thoughts raced, and he asked if they had been murdered. The inspector replied that the evidence suggested otherwise. Judging from the scene, it appeared to be suicide. Welch had repeatedly slammed his head against a wall, leaving it covered in blood. Naya had drowned herself in a simple water basin used for washing one's face. Klein could hardly believe it, insisting that such a thing was impossible. The inspector admitted that they had thought the same, but the autopsy results and the state of the scene left no clues of external involvement. The bodies bore no signs of struggle. The inspector continued the questioning, asking when Klein had last seen them. Klein recalled that it had been on June 26, when they had interpreted and read through a new section of the document. Afterward, he had returned home to prepare for his upcoming interview at the Department of History in Tianjin University, scheduled on the 30th. As the questioning went on, the second inspector's eyes fell upon Klein's journal lying on the table. He casually picked it up. Panic surged within Klein as he realized he had forgotten to hide it. Nervousness crept over him as his heart tightened at the thought of what they might discover inside. The first inspector reassured Klein not to be nervous, saying it was part of the required procedures. Klein's mind raced as he realized they were not planning to stop at all, yet none of them had shown a search warrant. He reminded himself that the Lone Kingdom's judicial system was still young and the police force itself had only been established 15 or 16 years ago, so search warrants might not even exist yet. The second inspector then held up Klein's journal from the table, calling his attention to a line written within it. He asked about its meaning. Tension gripped Klein as he remembered what that line meant. It was the phrase that everyone would die. Anxiety built inside him as he wondered whether he should lie his way out of this or attempt another approach. To him, it was common sense that everyone would die. Everyone except the number written there, 6005. Thoughts twisted rapidly as he considered whether revealing weakness might be dangerous. Yet at the same time, he realized this might be a chance to build connections with the police. This could even be an opportunity. Trying to steady himself, Klein claimed he did not know why he had written it. He explained that when he woke that morning, he had felt something was wrong, as though he had forgotten something. He insisted that the strange events of the past few days had left his mind unclear, and even to himself, the reason behind writing such a sentence remained uncertain. Inwardly, he reasoned that telling the truth with caution might be the safest path, yet doubts still lingered on whether they would believe him. One of the other inspectors reacted with anger, calling his explanation absurd. He accused Klein of pretending to have amnesia and declared he would sooner believe a plea of insanity. Klein firmly repeated that he was telling the truth. The first inspector, however, held a different view. He suggested that perhaps Klein really was telling the truth. He explained that an expert would be arriving in the next day or two, someone who could help Klein recover his lost memories. Klein froze in disbelief, realizing the inspector had accepted his story so easily. The thought of an expert probing into his mind unsettled him. He wondered if this person was a psychologist, and fear struck him at the possibility of his memories of Earth being exposed. The first inspector then closed the questioning. He thanked Klein for his cooperation and instructed that for the next few days, he should not leave Tianjin. If there was any reason to leave, he must notify Officer Mountbatten first, otherwise he would be held in contempt of the law. Klein nodded and agreed, realizing that the session was finally over. Yet unease filled him as he thought of what might come next. They might continue investigating or even take him back to the station. As they left, the second inspector made a passing remark, saying Klein was lucky. Normally, he explained, after encountering such an event, everyone involved would die. He emphasized how fortunate it was to see Klein alive. Klein's mind spun at those words. The idea that it was normal for everyone involved to die only deepened his confusion. He questioned why, if the matter was so frightening, they were not placing him under protection as an important witness. It felt careless, and he wondered if they were simply trying to test him, or even use him as bait. Overcome with nerves, he hurriedly told the inspector that they would surely protect him. He reminded himself that such a reaction would be natural for anyone in his position. Yet deep down, he knew his performance had been unconvincing. He realized he would need to dedicate real effort to improving his acting skills. Once the police were gone, Klein placed his belongings back in the locker and turned his focus to the evening ahead. He resolved to wait for Melissa to come home so they could have lamb and peas stew together. He knew her approach to cooking was far too simple and crude, and if he left it to her, it would be well past 7:30 before food was ready. By then, she would be starving. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Klein planned to show her what true cuisine could look like. As for the sudden revelation of his cooking skills, he chose to pin the inspiration on Welch. After all, the dead could not refute him. Klein stood in the kitchen, cooking as the fragrance of his food spread warmly through the air. Soon after, Melissa returned home and immediately noticed the aroma. She was surprised to see that Klein had prepared the meal himself. She tasted the food and was amazed at how delicious it was. The flavor stunned her, and she could hardly believe it was his first attempt. Klein told her he had already eaten a few bites while cooking, claiming it as the privilege of being the chef. Melissa laughed, praising the dish again, though she admitted it had all been meant for him. Klein explained that he had once asked Welch to teach him how to prepare this recipe, since Welch's chef was especially skilled. Still, compared to that, his own effort was lacking. He promised that once he got enough money, he would take Melissa and Benson out to a restaurant, where they could enjoy even better food together. Melissa smiled but quickly reminded him about his upcoming interview, and Klein jokingly told her that cleaning up would be her responsibility. She washed the dishes, still curious, and asked if he had used black pepper and lard. Klein admitted to using just a little, saying it was the price of making food taste so good. Melissa then suggested that she should return to doing the cooking, reminding him to focus instead on his interview and on securing a job. Klein laughed quietly to himself, thinking that she didn't need to bring up such a different matter in that moment. As night came, Melissa told him to make sure he slept early. They exchanged goodnight wishes and both went to bed. Sometime later, Klein was awakened by a knock at the door. Half asleep, he asked who it was, and a voice outside introduced itself as Dunn Smith. The name meant nothing to him, and he thought in confusion that he did not recognize it. When he opened the door, he saw that it was the first inspector from before. Klein asked if something had happened, and Dunn explained that they had found a coachman who confirmed seeing Klein on the 27th, the very day Welch and Naya had died. The coachman testified that Klein had gone to Welch's residence, and it had even been Welch who paid for the ride. Hearing this, Klein realized his suspicions were correct. On June 27th, the original Klein really had gone to Welch's home. Afterward, he had returned only to commit suicide that same night, just as Welch and Naya had. Klein insisted that this was not enough to prove he had anything to do with their deaths. He admitted honestly that he also wanted to know what had really happened that day, and what fate had befallen his two unfortunate friends. But he truly could not remember. Almost everything from the 27th was missing from his memory. The only reason he could even guess that he had gone to Welch's residence that day was because of the entries left in his journal. Smith looked at him carefully and noted that he had a strong composure. Smith entered Klein's room, where Klein immediately insisted that everything he had said so far was true. Deep inside, Klein acknowledged that it was only part of the truth. Smith revealed that one of Mr. Welch's revolvers was missing and unaccounted for, and he was confident he would find it here. Klein quickly realized that the weapon belonged to Welch. He raised his hands and admitted that the revolver was hidden beneath the bed, tucked inside the frame. Smith pressed him further, asking if there was anything else he wished to add. Klein confessed that 2 nights ago he had woken up in the middle of the night to find himself lying at his desk. The revolver had been beside him, and in the corner of the room he had seen a sped bullet. The scene looked as though he had attempted suicide. Perhaps it was because of his inexperience, or perhaps because he lost his nerve at the last moment, but the attempt had failed and he had survived. Afterward, he discovered that some of his memories were gone. Among the missing fragments were all memories of what he had seen or done at Welch's residence on the 27th. He insisted he was not lying and truly could not recall anything. Inwardly, Klein admitted he had been vague with his wording. Aside from the truth about his transmigration and the gathering, he had now confessed everything. He comforted himself with the thought that his secret probably would not be discovered. Smith listened and admitted the account aligned with his own deductions. It also matched the strange logic found in similar incidents from the past, though he could not understand how Klein had managed to survive. Klein responded that it was enough as long as Smith believed him, for he himself did not know how he had lived through it. But Smith reminded him that belief was not what mattered. Klein was still under heavy suspicion. An expert would need to confirm his story. The police had to ensure that he truly had forgotten what happened, and that he had no part in bringing about the deaths of Mr. Welch and Ms. Naya. Smith told him to cooperate with the investigation and accompany him to the police station, warning that the process might take 2 to 3 days. Klein agreed, but requested permission to leave a note first, explaining that she had arrived earlier than expected. Smith allowed it. As Klein wrote, he wondered anxiously whether the expert would be able to uncover the truth of his transmigration. He recalled how, right under the watch of the 7 major churches, Emperor Roselle had been assassinated. If even something like that had happened unnoticed, then transmigration might still be discovered and could place him before an arbitrator. He admitted to himself that he had no weapons, no combat abilities, and no way of knowing how many more police were waiting outside. If they drew their guns and opened fire, he would be finished. He resolved to take it one step at a time. When the note was complete, Smith escorted Klein outside and directed him toward the carriage. Just then, across the street, a man was caught stealing from a child. The thief struggled and cried out that he had not stolen anything. The man holding him shouted angrily for the boy to return what he had taken or face consequences. The thief continued to protest, insisting on his innocence. Seizing the chaos as an opportunity, Klein bolted, thinking this was his chance. He was stunned by the sudden distraction and realized that if he could escape the city, he would not have to meet the expert. His plan was to flee to Backland, a city with a dense population where it would be easier to hide. He noticed several carriages and quickly decided to use one. If he could board and then switch carriages along the way, he might throw the police off his trail for at least a little while. He approached a coachman and ordered him to take him quickly to the pier outside the city. The man agreed, and the carriage began to move. Klein's mind raced as he thought he was almost there. But then he asked where they were heading and was told their destination was Welch's residence. In shock, Klein realized too late that the man driving the carriage was none other than Smith himself. Klein awoke suddenly from his slumber, realizing with a jolt that everything he had just experienced had been a dream. He glanced at his watch and saw there was only 2:30 a.m. The realization struck him that he needed to step away for a moment to relieve himself. As he moved, he became aware of a figure standing behind him. Smith was there, and the sight left Klein stunned, unsure if he was still dreaming. Smith introduced himself as Dun Smith, a Nighthawk. Klein's mind immediately stirred, recalling that Nighthawks were the group of Beyonders mentioned by Justice and the Hanged Man, the organization under the Church of the Goddess. His thoughts raced as he wondered if Smith had been controlling his dreams, causing the strange visions he had just experienced. Smith clarified that he had not controlled the dream but had only entered it to provide necessary guidance. As Klein processed this, Smith explained that when one is dreaming, thoughts and emotions usually kept buried rise to the surface, making everything appear chaotic, absurd, and strange. Yet the truth always lingers within, hidden but discoverable. For someone experienced like Smith, finding the truth was easy. Compared to Klein's conscious self, he found Klein's dreaming self more reliable. Klein realized that ordinary people could not control their dreams. This meant that if he dreamt about something from Earth, Smith would inevitably find out. In his dream, however, Klein had remained clear-headed, fully aware of what could and could not be revealed. He had shown only what he intended for Smith to see. He began to suspect that his mental state was unusual because of his transmigration, or perhaps because of some added effect from the luck enhancement ritual. Klein then asked if Smith now fully believed he had lost his memories. Smith noted that most people he had met before, even after finishing a dream, would still refuse to believe that Beyonder powers existed and would prefer to think they were still asleep. Klein, however, felt differently. He hoped and prayed that such powers could be used to help him, a thought that intrigued Smith. Smith reflected that perhaps it was not only luck that had kept Klein alive. He confirmed that Klein had indeed lost parts of his memory due to the incident, especially memories directly connected to it. Klein then asked if he could go home, but Smith denied the request. He explained that Klein still needed to accompany him to meet an expert. Klein questioned why this was necessary, thinking to himself that it had to be a joke. If the expert possessed skills like hypnosis or mind reading, the truth of his transmigration could easily be exposed. Smith assured him that while he was confident about matters of dreams, it never hurt to double-check critical things. The expert, he explained, specialized in a different area and might even be able to help Klein recover some of his memories. This could include recalling the current whereabouts of the notebook Klein had been so concerned about, the Antigonas family's notebook. Klein was shocked. Smith revealed that they had been unable to find the fourth epoch notebook, despite searching extensively through Mr. Welch's home. They had discovered nothing. Naya was dead. Welch was dead. Klein was now the only remaining clue. Klein's thoughts raced as he realized that the notebook had vanished without him ever once considering its location before this moment. Smith then instructed Klein to go with him to Welch's residence where the expert was waiting. Klein felt an overwhelming urge to run, but he knew Beyonders were far more powerful than ordinary humans. Based on Smith's behavior during the dream, he had already raised his guard, and Klein was certain he was armed with a gun. As Smith escorted Klein in the carriage, he questioned him about why he had tried to escape at the end of his dream and what he had been so afraid of. Klein explained that he no longer remembered what he had done at Welch's house, nor whether he had caused their deaths. He admitted he was terrified that he might truly turn out to be the culprit. Fear had overtaken him, and he thought it would be better to run away, to flee to the southern continent and begin a new life there. Smith acknowledged his reasoning and admitted that, in his place, he would have thought the same. Klein then asked about the possibility of the expert confirming that he really had lost those memories. He wanted to know if, in the absence of evidence proving him guilty, the matter would finally be resolved. Smith replied that, in theory, it would. He explained that they would continue searching for the missing notebook, and also ensure Klein had not been cursed, nor was he hosting demons or evil spirits. They needed to confirm that he could live a safe and stable life in the future. Klein pressed further, questioning the word theory and asking if anything had ever broken this logic. Smith recalled a case from a few years ago involving a cult that forced its followers to commit suicide as living sacrifices. One follower had resisted, reported the cult, and helped resolve the case. No trace of demonic influence had been found in him, and afterward he lived an ordinary life with good finances, a strong marriage, and a smart, adorable child. Yet, in March of that year, the man suddenly strangled himself to death in his office. Klein was shocked to hear such an ending. Soon, the carriage reached their destination. Smith announced that they had arrived at Welch's residence and asked Klein to step down. As they walked toward the house, Smith introduced the expert. To the outside world, she was known as the most renowned spirit medium of Olwa County, though that was only a disguise. Her true identity was that of a genuine spirit medium named Daly. Inside, Daly greeted them with a calm good evening. They took their seats on the sofa. Smith immediately asked if there were any results. Daly reported that the original spirits, including those of Welch and Naya, had already disappeared. Smith acknowledged how troublesome that was. Daly then agreed to shift her focus. Smith introduced Klein to her and asked if she could try to uncover anything from him. Klein grew tense, wondering what she could possibly find out from him. The thought of being exposed made him uneasy, and he wished desperately for something special to shield him. The feeling of being stared at by Daly left him unsettled. Daly spoke gently, explaining that since Klein was not an enemy, she could not treat him harshly. Doing so would cause him pain and could even result in serious complications later. She told him she would provide fragrances to help him loosen up, creating a smooth and gentle sensation that would allow him to immerse himself in the experience. Klein found her words strange and unsettling. Smith reassured him not to think it unusual. Unlike the followers of the Lord of Storms, they had different customs, and here women could tease men verbally without issue. He reminded Klein of his mother's devotion to the Evernight goddess and of his and his brother's attendance at Sunday school lessons, saying he should understand this. Klein admitted he did, though he never expected it to feel this way. Smith added that Daly rarely used this method and was only doing it to help him relax. He emphasized that her true interest lay in corpses rather than in men. Klein, nervous and silent, stayed still as Daly lightly protested that Smith was making her sound perverse. She quickly moved on, saying it was time to begin. She presented an herbal distillate made from white vanilla, slumber flower, and chamomile extract, which she called a mantha, meaning tranquility in the Herm's language. She promised it smelled pleasant. Next, she introduced another mixture named Eye of the Spirit. She explained how it was crafted from the bark and leaves of drago and polar trees, sun-dried for 7 days, decocted 3 times, and immersed in Lanti wine, with several incantations added throughout. It was useful in mediumship and potent enough to enchant those exposed to it. Klein recognized the sensation it produced, comparing it to what he had felt during his luck enhancement ritual. Yet this time, it lacked the madness that had once made him feel as though he would explode. Daly smiled and gave her formal introduction, declaring herself as the true spirit medium Daly. Daly began the ritual by explaining how humans possessed vast cognitive scopes with countless secrets hidden deep within their thoughts. She compared the mind to a wide ocean, where the things people knew about themselves were merely small islands poking above the surface. Klein realized the ritual had started. Daly continued, saying that beneath those islands lay much more than what could be seen, and above them stretched the boundless sky, symbolizing the spiritual world. Klein noticed he could still think calmly, much like during his luck enhancement ritual and the secret gathering. Unsure of what would follow, he decided to pretend that he had already fallen under her spell. As Daly lit a candle and added liquid, she explained that the spirit within a body knew both the exposed islands and the hidden depths beneath. If a memory existed, it would always leave traces behind. At that moment, Klein, Smith, and Daly seemed to arrive in another place. Klein wondered if this was the ocean of his mind. Daly stated that a memory above water could be erased, yet beneath the surface or within the water itself, reflections of it would still remain. Klein denied this, claiming he did not think so. Smith repeated the point that the spirit within knew the entire ocean, both above and below. Daly affirmed that if it existed, it would always leave traces. Klein insisted that he could not remember and had forgotten, secretly hoping he had timed his performance correctly. Daly repeated her earlier words about human cognition and then ended the ritual, calling him back. The scene shifted back to the room. Klein wondered if it was truly over. Smith questioned Daly about why she had used a theory belonging to psychology alchemists, who were considered madmen. Daly admitted she felt it was accurate, aligning with her past experiences. She found Klein tricky, noting that not a single trace had been left behind. Klein thought the entire process felt like a dream, yet he was glad the luck ritual had given him practice for this. He concluded that it was safe to say he had cleared this stage. Smith agreed, saying they would assume so, and then asked Daly if she had examined Welch and Naya's bodies. As Daly extinguished the candles, she explained that corpses often revealed much, but in this case, Welch and Naya had truly committed suicide. The power that influenced them was terrifying, leaving no trace behind. She said she needed rest. Smith led Klein outside and congratulated him, telling him he could return home. However, Klein was warned never to speak of this matter to friends or family. Klein then questioned whether he still needed to be checked for curses or evil spirits. Smith reassured him that if Daly had found nothing, then none existed. Klein pressed again, asking how he could be sure no more trouble would come to him. Smith told him not to worry, explaining that in similar past cases, 80% of people experienced no further incidents. Klein, however, thought uneasily about the unlucky 20% who did. Smith then added that Klein could consider joining the Nighthawks as civilian personnel or even becoming a Beyonder himself. Shocked, Klein asked if such a thing was truly possible. Smith explained that they were not babysitters and could not always keep watch on Klein day and night, to the extent of even witnessing his most private moments. However, he assured that if Klein joined them, at the very least they would be able to immediately detect any warning signs that came his way. Klein responded hesitantly, questioning if he really could do this. Inwardly, he wondered if this was some kind of joke. if becoming a Beyonder was truly this easy. Smith clarified that it was not as simple as it sounded. It depended entirely on the situation. He warned Klein not to doubt his words, stating that if he truly chose to become a Nighthawk, he would have to sacrifice a great deal. Among these sacrifices was freedom, and even if that was set aside, there were countless other problems to face. He explained that Klein was neither a clergyman nor a devotee, which meant he would not be choosing the safest path toward becoming a Beyonder. He then revealed the truth of the incidents handled every year by the mandated punishers, the machinery hive mind, and other judicial branches of the churches. 1/4 of these incidents involved Beyonders who had lost control, and within that 1/4, a good portion were comrades from within their own ranks. Klein grew alarmed. He muttered in shock that 1 in every 4 cases were Beyonders who had lost control. His heart tightened as he questioned why this was so. He wondered if being a Beyonder came with serious hidden dangers, so severe that even those within the church's internal judicial systems were vulnerable to succumbing to them. Smith responded coldly, saying this was not something Klein needed to understand, nor was it something he could understand unless he became one of them. The two then stepped into a carriage. Klein insisted that unless he fully understood the matter, he could not possibly make the decision to join. Yet he realized that if he did not join, he could never understand, leaving him trapped in an endless and paradoxical cycle. Smith corrected his misunderstanding, explaining that there were civilians within their ranks. Klein deduced that if he became part of their civilian personnel, he could eventually learn the relevant secrets. Only after gaining such knowledge could he truly decide whether or not to become a Beyonder. Smith agreed, but added a warning. Deciding to become a Beyonder did not necessarily mean one would actually succeed. In this regard, all of the different churches were equally strict. Klein then raised the question of becoming civilian personnel, wondering if that too was a strict process. Smith replied that for Klein, there would be no problems. Curious, Klein asked why. In his thoughts, he feared that his special identity as a transmigrator shone too obviously, perhaps revealing itself even in the night. Smith explained the reasons. Firstly, Klein had not required their help to survive the recent incident. That alone showed he possessed an advantage over the average person. He suggested Klein might be luckier than most, and lucky people were always welcome among them. Quickly, he brushed it off as a joke, but then continued. Secondly, Klein was a history graduate from Koei University, and they sorely needed someone with such expertise. Smith elaborated that they frequently encountered ancient documents and mysterious objects, many of which cults and heretics sought to exploit in order to grow stronger. When they tried, terrible and unnatural things often happened. Outside of specialists, most of the Nighthawks were neither studious nor well-learned. In the past, they had considered cooperating with external experts, but this came with risks of information leaks and possible misfortune for the experts themselves. For this reason, whenever professionals sought to join them, it was something they could not turn away. He added with dry humor that such knowledge was so dull it could even put the sleepless to sleep. Klein wondered why they did not simply train a historian from scratch. Smith revealed the third and most important point. The kinds of incidents they faced were like the one Klein had already experienced. Since he had already been exposed, extending an invitation to him did not violate his oath of confidentiality. But if they tried training an outsider from the beginning and it failed, the responsibility for any exposed secrets would fall entirely on them. For this reason, most of their teams, even civilian staff, were drawn from within the church itself. Klein then asked why they were so strict about confidentiality. He reasoned that if more people knew, it could help avoid similar mistakes in the future. Smith shook his head. He explained that spreading such knowledge would only inspire imitation, leading to more severe incidents. Klein reflected bitterly that humans never learn from history. They always repeated the same tragedies again and again. Smith acknowledged this with admiration, noting that the quote was from Emperor Roselle and filled with philosophical truth. Klein thought deeply, realizing that Emperor Roselle, his senior in transmigration, seemed truly all-encompassing. The man left no blind spots, leaving his junior no room to display even the slightest ability in comparison. Smith added that within the judiciaries of the major churches, there was a similar saying. It was the main reason for their strict confidentiality and the main reason why none of this could be revealed to the public. Klein wanted to know what this saying was. Smith explained that faith and fear beget trouble, and greater faith and greater fear beget even greater troubles, until in the end, everything is destroyed. Beyond praying to the gods for blessings and aid, humans had no other means to truly solve the greatest problems before them. Klein silently repeated the phrase in his mind, weighing its meaning. Smith then asked if Klein wanted to join them as civilian personnel. Klein hesitated and requested some time to think. Smith agreed, telling him there was no problem as long as he had an answer before Sunday. He warned Klein to keep all of this secret and never reveal what happened to Welch, not even to his brother or sister. If he did, not only would he cause them trouble, but he might also find himself placed before a special court of law. Klein finally agreed, promising to stay silent. It finally arrived, and Klein immediately called for Mr. Smith. Smith responded, and Klein reminded him of the time. It was 9 o'clock. Klein asked about the civilian personnel, wondering how well they were paid and what kind of benefits they received. Smith explained that there was no need to worry about such matters. As qualifications and contributions grew, the salary would gradually increase. Smith continued, stating that civilian personnel usually signed a 5-year contract. Once the 5 years ended, they could quit without issue. However, those who quit would be required to sign a lifelong confidentiality agreement. They would not be allowed to leave Tianjin without prior approval, and if they moved to another city, they would have to register with a local Nighthawk. Klein then asked where he should go once he made his decision. Smith told him to go to the Hound Pub on Bessick Street, ask for their boss named Wright, and tell him he wanted to hire a mercenary squad. The two of them stepped out of the carriage. Their location was confidential, and until Klein agreed to join, Smith could not reveal anything further. Smith then wished Klein pleasant dreams for the night and left. Klein checked his watch and felt relieved. It was a little after 4 in the morning. At last, he had managed to get past the spirit medium stage. When Klein returned home, he found Melissa sitting in his room. She asked where he had been. She explained that she had woken earlier to go to the bathroom and realized he wasn't home. Klein's thoughts grew uneasy. He wondered why Melissa was there and whether she had discovered anything. He quickly explained to her that he had woken in the middle of the night and could not fall back asleep. Not wanting to waste time, he decided to exercise and went out for a run. To prove it, he pointed out that he was soaked in sweat. Melissa sighed. She told him not to stress so much. She reassured him that he would definitely be able to pass Tianjin University's interview and that he did not need to push himself so hard. Even if somehow he failed, and that was only a distant possibility, she believed he would still find something better. Klein acknowledged her words, but Melissa suddenly stopped him. She told him to wait and pulled out something she had made. It was crafted from spare parts the school did not need, as well as things she had found lying around. She had just finished it recently. Melissa explained that whenever she felt worried, watching it move calmed her down a lot. She had been doing it often and found it very effective. She wanted Klein to give it a try. Klein was amazed and praised her. He thought it was a turtle. Melissa corrected him, saying it was a puppet. Klein realized the problem was with the materials, which were too simple and crude. He then asked why she needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, since she had a chamber pot in her room. At that moment, Melissa's stomach made a loud noise from hunger. Embarrassed, she ran away, claiming she was going back to sleep. Klein reflected quietly, realizing that yesterday's dinner had been too delicious and Melissa had eaten too much. Her body was simply not used to digesting such heavy food. Left alone, Klein sat and thought. He knew he needed to give serious consideration to Dunsmith's invitation.